Hey, this is Stephen K4ATZ, amateur radio operator. I've been licensed for 40 years. I was first licensed as a novice class, WN4PBV. I upgraded to my general class, kind of skipped right over the technician. That was WA4PBV. I had that call sign for a number of years, upgraded to advanced class. Changed my call sign to November 4 Kilowatt Tango Zulu N4KTZ, and now K4ATZ became available, which is basically my last name minus the number. Why did I tell you all that? I really don't know. Anyways, what we're going to talk about today is some basics of amateur radio, primarily in the UHF, VHF, or should I say VHF, UHF portions of the band. This can apply to HF frequencies as well, but we're going to talk about some basics to kind of get you started into communications and using a HT or a mobile rig in the car. The most popular frequency for technician class or for local communication, it will be 2 meters. This ranges from 144 megahertz through 148 megahertz. If you're familiar, sorry about that. If you're familiar with FM broadcast radio, it starts at about 88 megahertz and goes to 106, 107, maybe 108 megahertz. So that's FM, which is the modulation, how your speech is transmitted. We'll talk, maybe we won't talk about that in this video. But anyways, you can see 2 meters is a little bit above that, 144, so you've got that stopping at 108 and then 144, relatively close. There are some business band frequencies kind of close to that. And then also you have NOAA weather radio, which is in the 162 portion. So you see that's a little above 2 meters. So let's talk about 2 meters, and then we're going to go to some other frequencies as well that amateurs have, that you can use this same principle that I'm going to discuss. That principle being repeaters or direct communications, simplex, etc., being direct. There's 220 megahertz, which hams or amateurs have a portion of the band. There's 440 megahertz, and then there's microwave, which is in the 1.2 megahertz band. And then below that in the HF band, sometimes repeaters can be used in the 6 meter, which is the 52 megahertz band, and then 10 meters, which is about 28 megahertz. So when you become licensed in your technician class, some of the most popular privileges you will get will be 2 meters. As I said, it's the most common. It has good characteristics for local communication. When I say local, on direct communication, car to car with 25 to 50 watts, you can talk anywhere from 0 to maybe if you've got a base station talking to mobile or base to base, could be 100 to 150 miles possibly. If a repeater is involved, it could theoretically be 1 to 200. As far as the square mileage, it's a lot of territory. So if a repeater is located, say, on Stone Mountain here in Atlanta, it can have a very good radius and cover most of Metro Atlanta, most of the suburbs of considered Metro Atlanta. But the first type of communication we have is called direct communication. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in just a little bit and explain this. So let's say this is our station, 2 meter station, right here, okay? And then we have me. Then we have our friend, here. All right, we want to talk. We're in the 140, let's say we're using 146.52 megahertz. This is a very popular calling frequency for 2 meters, and usually the way this works if you're using this frequency is called direct communication. And what that means is just like your family band or old walkie-talkie, you're speaking directly, or maybe even better, I should put it this way, directly to each other. So transmitted signal here, transmitted signal here. You're receiving and transmitting on the same frequency. Okay? Now, lo and behold, there's something that even police and business band, a lot of people use. It's called a repeater. And a repeater is a way to speak a lot farther, and a lot of times these things can be located on top of buildings, on top of, let's say, Stone Mountain. So this machine is located in Stone Mountain, and what it is a machine that's electronics, and then when I'm speaking, my signal will go to this machine in one frequency. So let's say we're using a popular band frequency, let's say Stone Mountain frequency, 146.16. 146.16 transmit. This machine will take your signal, and since it's high, it will strengthen it, clear it up, and then transmit it back out to your friend on a frequency of 146.76. That'll be the receive frequency of the friend, okay? So how does it work the other way? When the friend talks back, they will transmit on 146.16, and then of course me or us or whoever will receive on 146.76. So it makes it stronger, clearer, it's in a better location, and this can make your communications anywhere from 2 to 10, maybe 20, maybe even 50 times farther than the direct communication. Also, much lower wattage is usually required to do this. So on 2 meters, there's also something called a 600 hertz spread. So if you look at these two numbers, or excuse me, the transmit and the receive, that would be 146.16 transmit and 146.76 receive. There's a 600 kilohertz difference. Kilohertz, correct. Generally, in this part of the band, it is transmit is the lower and receive is higher. But if you go to 147, it's usually the opposite. So, without trying to get too confused, let's say 147.75 would be transmit, and then 147.15 receive. So it'd still be the 600 kilohertz split, but it'd be the opposite way. And then 145 works the same way as 147, but anyways, we're diverting. What I want you to understand is, at the repeater site, and let's just say what a repeater, it's usually high. Okay, let's go up. Usually high, stronger, changes frequency, and also at repeater, like before phones were so popular, there could be something called an auto patch, which by using certain tones on the frequency, certain tones on the radio, could bring up and tap into the phone line, since that's at a fixed location, okay, the mountain. There could be a phone, emergency power, etc. Okay? And again, a lot of people, to be more private, prefer the simplex. Direct, it's called simplex. Same word, simplex. Simplex being usually the term for amateurs to use. Repeater, usually you'll say go through the repeater, or some people, or it's called duplex. Duplex being, of course, 2. And so simplex and duplex. Now, sometimes to activate a repeater, you'll have to have a certain tone, and it's a sub-audible. Back in the day, repeaters used to be open. And when I say open, I mean there would be no sub-audible tone required. But what happened is, as repeaters became more popular, and as people like Radio Shack started selling them, some people had a tendency to maybe want to try to use their microphone when they weren't licensed. Not a good thing. You can get in a lot of trouble. There's a lot of penalties, stiff penalties. I think it was $10,000 per occurrence and up to a year in jail. Not good. So you really don't want to do that, especially nowadays. The triangulation and the equipment can really zap you. Okay, long story short, they created this system where your signal has to have a sub-audible tone in order to operate the repeater. So that's a little more complex going into the radio, and a lot of people who were buying them off the shelf just couldn't figure it out. So it decreased the QRM, which means interference, unlicensed people, whatever you want to call it. It decreased it by probably 90%, 95%. It just stopped. So these sub-audible tones have many different ones as well. So they'll range from 88.5 hertz or whatever it is up to 150, 160 something. And every repeater is a little different. There are some repeaters that do not require this. Now, as far as the 600 kilohertz split, some what they call oddball repeaters, again, ham radio terminology, will have a split that's different than 600. Not very common, but again, another complicating factor for people getting on. A lot of closed repeaters or private repeaters, however you want to phrase it, will have an odd, maybe 800 or 1 point something. But on 400 megahertz, the ham band, there's a 4 megahertz, I think it's 4 megahertz, that's bad. I don't usually use UHF a lot, split for the receive and transmit on the repeater, as we were talking about in this demonstration. And then there's a different one, and these are kind of standards in the ham radio. There's a different one for 6 meters, there's a different one for 10 meters, 6 meters being 50 megahertz, 10 meters being 28 megahertz. There's a different one for 2 meters, which is the one I know right off the bat, 600. Then a different one for 220 megahertz, and a different one for 440 megahertz, and another different one for microwaves, which is getting up to 1.2 something, it's gigahertz. So I think those are the basics on repeater operation. The transmitters will have, of course, variable, most of them will have variable wattage output, even the little HTs like this. If you're around town, these things can work real well. They work better with the external antenna. If you're at the house, much better to have an outside antenna than using these rubber duckies. Even if you're inside and have a metal magnetic mount, work a lot better. And then, of course, the rules state that you always want to use the minimum amount of power possible. So if it only takes you 5 watts to clearly get into the repeater, by rules you're only supposed to use the 5 watts, not the 50 watts, not an amplifier with 100 watts. You're supposed to use the 5 watts. A lot of people will leave their radios on high and it'll just transmit the high power output. You know, I'm sure that goes on probably most of the time just from, you know, laziness and not wanting. A lot of radios you can program. So if you know you're close to a Stone Mountain repeater and you know it only takes a watt to get in, when you memorize the frequencies in your radio, a lot of times it can program, the power output is programmed as well, and then you can usually override it. So if you get further away from the mountain, you can up the power outage. Behind me is a HF radio, which is a high frequency. It does have a 2-meter module you can buy for it. I don't have that. It allows this to be operated in the 144 to 148 megahertz band. I don't know if I'll get it because I have 2-meter operation. I have this and some other, actually other walkie-talkies, and then I have some mobile rigs. But 2 meters is probably the most popular for local communications. Some area of the country, the UHF, the 440 is more popular just because there's a lot more interference, or close by with the business band. No weather radio, sometimes there's more interference than 2 meters, so people like to go up to 440 where it's a little quieter, maybe not as much interference. So if you have any other questions, feel free to email me or put the comments below. If you're studying for your ham test, this information will help you. And if anything, after you get your ticket or while you're getting your ticket, this will help you tremendously in being an operating procedure and understanding the concept of repeaters versus direct in ham radio communication. So 73s, which means goodbye, sayonara, and all that good stuff. If a ham's talking to his wife or girlfriend or vice versa, they may say 88s, which means hugs and kisses. But for YouTube purposes, we'll stick with 73s, okay? 73s, and we'll put some more videos and go more in depth into 2 meters and ham radio communication.